There comes a moment in life when seeking ends, not because you have found all the answers, but because the questions no longer control you. Carl Jung believed that true awakening is not about becoming more spiritual, more moral, or more enlightened in the way society imagines. Awakening is about integration, about wholeness, about the sacred marriage between consciousness and the unconscious. And at the very end of this journey, Jung hinted at a state few ever reach, a state symbolized by Sophia. Sophia is not knowledge. It is wisdom that has survived suffering. It is truth that has passed through chaos and returned intact. If you are here listening to this, it may be because something inside you already recognizes what words can barely explain. The Sophia Stage does not announce itself with visions or supernatural experiences. It arrives quietly, almost invisibly. And yet everything changes. The first sign you have entered the Sophia Stage is this: you no longer feel the need to prove who you are. Earlier in life, identity feels fragile. The ego fights for recognition, validation, belonging. But in Sophia consciousness, identity stabilizes. You stop explaining yourself. You stop defending your path. You stop correcting people who misunderstand you, not because you are passive, but because your center no longer depends on agreement. Jung wrote that the mature soul no longer needs mirrors to exist, and when this happens, silence becomes more powerful than argument. Presence becomes stronger than performance. The second sign is more unsettling. You feel deeply at home with paradox. Most people crave certainty. Sophia does not. You can hold opposing truths without anxiety. You understand that life can be cruel and meaningful at the same time, that love can wound and heal, that God can be silent and present simultaneously. This is not confusion. It is integration. In Jungian psychology, this is the union of opposites, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, faith and doubt. When these forces stop fighting inside you, wisdom emerges naturally. The third sign is subtle but unmistakable. Your relationship with suffering changes. Pain no longer feels like punishment, it feels like information. You don't romanticize suffering, but you don't fear it either. You've seen what it can produce when faced consciously. You know that every descent carries a message, and that resisting pain often creates more of it. Sophia consciousness does not ask, "Why is this happening to me?" It asks, "What is this shaping me into?" And that single shift changes everything. The fourth sign marks a major internal transformation. You no longer chase purpose. Purpose moves through you. Earlier stages of awakening are obsessed with mission, with destiny, with finding one's calling. But in Sophia, calling is no longer external. It becomes an expression of alignment. You don't need to force meaning. Your actions feel naturally ordered. Right effort replaces hustle. Right timing replaces anxiety. This is what Jung meant when he said that the individuated person does not choose their path, they embody it. Before we go deeper, pause for a moment. If any of this resonates, it's not accidental. Recognition is never random. Comment this phrase below to anchor what's already awakening in you. Wisdom begins when I stop resisting myself. In the next part, we'll explore the signs that are even H as the Sophia stage deepens. Awakening stops feeling like expansion and starts feeling like subtraction. This is where many people become confused. They expect more light, more certainty, more clarity. Instead, what arrives is simplicity. Layers fall away, illusions dissolve quietly, and what remains feels strangely ordinary, yet unshakable. The fifth sign you have entered the Sophia stage is this: you are no longer afraid of being alone, even internally. Most people fear solitude because it forces them to meet themselves without distraction. But in Sophia consciousness, inner loneliness dissolves, not because others are always present, but because you are no longer fragmented inside. Jung believed that neurosis is often the result of inner division, parts of the psyche fighting for dominance. In Sophia, these inner conflicts soften, silence becomes inhabited, stillness becomes alive. You may notice that you require less stimulation, less noise, less explanation, and this is not withdrawal, it is integration. The sixth sign is one that almost always feels unsettling at first. Your old desires begin to lose their emotional charge. What once felt urgent now feels optional. Status, approval, recognition, even certain ambitions, they don't vanish, but they no longer control you. This is not apathy, it is freedom. Desire in earlier stages is driven by lack. In Sophia, action is driven by alignment. You still create, you still build, you still contribute, but you no longer need outcomes to validate your worth. Jung described this as the ego stepping out of the throne and allowing the self to lead. When this happens, effort becomes cleaner, less desperate, more precise. The seventh sign is subtle but profound. You begin to see through collective illusions without bitterness. You recognize the unconscious patterns that drive society: fear, imitation, projection. Yet you don't feel superior for seeing them. There is no urge to wake others up, no need to argue, no crusade. You understand that awakening cannot be forced, and that everyone is at a different stage of development. This is one of the clearest indicators of maturity. When truth no longer needs to be weaponized, Sophia does not shout, it does not convert, it does not dominate. It simply exists, and in its presence falsehood reveals itself naturally. The eighth sign begins to emerge here, but it takes time to fully embody. Your relationship with the unconscious becomes cooperative, not confrontational. Dreams become clearer. Intuition becomes quieter but more accurate. You trust inner signals without obsessing over them. You no longer hunt symbols for meaning. Meaning finds you. This is the psychological equivalent of what ancient traditions called wisdom of the heart. Knowledge that does not need constant interpretation because it is already integrated. Pause here again. If these words feel familiar rather than new, it's because awakening does not feel like learning. It feels like remembering. Comment this phrase below to seal what resonates. I no longer need to chase what already lives within me. At this stage, awakening no longer feels empowering in the way the ego expects. It feels disorienting, not because something is wrong, but because something false is finally dissolving. This is where many turn back. The ninth realization of the Sophia stage, though rarely spoken, is this: you stop identifying with the spiritual self you once tried to become. Earlier on the path, spirituality becomes an identity, a role, a narrative. But Sophia strips even this away. You no longer need to appear awakened, conscious, evolved, or enlightened. There is a quiet relief in this. You stop managing how others perceive your depth. You stop curating wisdom. You stop explaining your insights. Truth becomes something you live, not something you display. This can feel like a loss at first, as if something meaningful is fading. But what's fading is the persona, not the essence. Another unmistakable sign appears here. You develop a deep tolerance for ambiguity without emotional collapse. Life stops offering clean answers. Relationships feel more complex. Choices carry uncertainty, and yet you remain steady. You no longer rush to resolve tension just to feel safe. You allow questions to remain open. You trust that clarity emerges in time, not through force. This is wisdom beyond intellect. The psyche at this stage is no longer desperate for control. It has learned that meaning unfolds. It is not manufactured. Then comes a transformation that few talk about honestly. Your compassion becomes quieter and less sentimental. You still care, deeply, but you no longer try to rescue others from their pain. You no longer absorb emotional chaos as proof of love. You've learned that carrying what does not belong to you is not kindness. It is distortion. This is where boundaries stop feeling defensive and start feeling sacred. You understand that each soul must confront its own unconscious, and interfering too early often delays that process. Sophia compassion respects timing. Another subtle sign emerges. You feel less compelled to speak, and more precise when you do. Words carry weight now. You choose them carefully. Silence is no longer empty space. It is active presence. When you speak, it is not to convince. It is to clarify. And when silence is chosen, it is not avoidance. It is discernment. This is one of the clearest shifts from intellect to wisdom. Knowledge talks. Wisdom listens. Before moving forward, take a moment. If you recognize yourself here, it means the psyche has crossed a threshold that cannot be undone. There is no return to unconscious innocence, only deeper integration. Comment this phrase to ground what's unfolding within you. I release the need to perform my awakening. At the final movement of the Sophia stage, something unexpected happens. Nothing dramatic. Nothing mystical, nothing that can be shown, proven, or explained, and yet everything changes. The last sign of the Sophia stage is this. You stop experiencing life as a personal narrative. Events no longer revolve around me. Success is not inflated. Failure is not personalized. Praise doesn't elevate you. Criticism doesn't collapse you. Life moves, and you move with it. This is not detachment, it is participation without possession. Jung hinted that the fully individuated person no longer lives from the ego's storyline, but from a deeper order, one that feels aligned rather than controlled. You still feel emotions, but they pass through you instead of defining you. You still experience loss, but it does not fracture your core. You are no longer psychologically homeless. Another quiet shift becomes evident. You trust life without needing guarantees. Not blind faith, not naive optimism, but a grounded trust that emerges only after you've survived your own inner collapse and rebuilt from truth rather than illusion. You've seen what happens when control fails, and you've seen what remains when it does. This trust is not belief, it is familiarity. The unconscious is no longer a threat. The future is no longer an enemy. Even death loses some of its terror, not because you understand it, but because you no longer resist mystery. Then comes the most misunderstood aspect of Sophia. You disappear without vanishing. You no longer need to be central. You don't push yourself forward. You don't shrink either. You simply occupy your place. Accurately, your presence becomes grounding. Not intense, not impressive, but stabilizing. People may feel calm around you without knowing why, or unsettled, because truth without force can be confronting. Sophia does not seek followers. It creates mirrors. At this stage, wisdom expresses itself through ordinary acts, through restraint, through timing, through knowing when not to act. Nothing about this stage feels heroic. And that is precisely why it is rare. Jung believed that the final stage of psychological maturity is not transcendence away from the world, but full participation without illusion. You are here, fully, quietly, responsibly, and nothing inside you is divided anymore. Before this journey closes, pause one last time. If this entire series felt less like information and more like recognition, then the Sophia stage is not something you are approaching. It is something you are remembering. Comment this final phrase to seal what has already integrated within you. I live aligned, not divided. And if you carry this awareness forward, know this. Awakening does not make life easier. It makes it real. And that is the final gift of Sophia.